Good afternoon and welcome to the CanVector National Thrombosis Seminars. CanVector National Thrombosis Seminars are monthly seminars hosted live throughout the academic year, featuring lectures presented by both Canadian and international experts. Video recordings of the seminars will be available online. The CanVector Seminars is a self-reported group learning activity. The planning committee is chaired by Dr. Maral Koulian, and you have here a list of all its members. Today's presentation will be given by Miss Carol West and Dr. Lisa Duffett, and is entitled Outreach and Opportunity, Patient Engagement in VTE Research. Ms. Carol West joined CanVector as a patient partner in 2016 and has collaborated on a variety of research studies and CanVector projects since then. In 2020, she was elected to the position of co-lead of the Patient Partner Platform. She is CanVector's first patient partner in a leadership position. In her business life as a CEO of a nonprofit industry organization located in Ottawa, Ms. West provides advocacy and education to members and has led and participated in many Canadian and international discussions on a range of issues related to trade facilitation, border management, and supply chain security. An academic background in political and policy studies has provided a solid foundation for Ms. West's lifelong interest in and commitment to the possibilities of government-business partnership in Canada and worldwide. Dr. Lisa Duffett is a hematologist with the Ottawa Hospital with a subspecialty in thrombosis. Dr. Duffett is an associated scientist with the Ottawa Hospital Research Institute and assistant professor with the University of Ottawa. Dr. Duffett's research interests focus on improving patient quality and safety through patient education. She is actively involved in engaging patients in research and quality improvement projects, and has been awarded a peer-reviewed research grant from the CIHR to support patient engagement initiatives. Dr. Duffett has been the co-lead of CanVector's Patient Partner Platform since its inception in 2015. There will be a 15-minute Q&A period at the end of the presentations. You can submit questions at any time throughout the seminar using the Q&A on the platform. I'm going to hand over to Ms. West and Dr. Duffett.
Great, thank you, Dr. Deluc. And it's a great pleasure for Dr. Duffett and I to be here this afternoon in a professional development capacity. And one of the things about professional development we know is that we have to have some learning objectives for this event. And we thought that we would want you to learn three things as a result of our conversations today. First of all, to describe the elements of CanVector's Patient Partner Council. Secondly, to identify some CanVector projects with which patient partners are engaged. And third, to recognize the value of patient partners in VTE research. So those are the learning objectives for today, and we're pretty sure we can achieve those. There's one other objective, though, that we have, and that's related to our recruitment of patient partners. So we hope you'll be so excited by the end of this session that you too will be looking for patient partners. So think about people you know who would be great patient partners throughout this session and make a connection with us following the session.
Thanks, Carol. So to start off, I'd just like to take a brief moment to kind of just review why is it that researchers should be considering partnering with patients on the research. So of course, a successful research team will pull together many experts. You'll have methodologists, statisticians, knowledge translation experts, and persons with lived experience in the disease area is an extremely valuable type of expert that I would like to argue and convince you today should be added to that list. So a person with lived experience could be someone who was a patient themselves, or it might be a family member or a caregiver who's helped a patient through a VTE journey. So the purposes of this talk, we're going to use the word patient just to include all of those groups of people, but all of those would account as a patient lived experience. As a clinician, no doubt we do gain some understanding and interactions with our patients of what their journey is like as a patient, but that's really no replacement from that understanding that comes from actually living it, actually experiencing a new diagnosis and having potentially long-term impacts on your lifestyle and career. So researchers have much to gain to listening to that voice and having that voice included in the design and conduct of research. The patients can make sure that we're asking the right questions, measuring the right outcomes, designing a trial that a patient would be willing to participate in, where the barriers or burden asked of them is not too intense. Understand that the promotional material and consent forms are written in a way that patients can understand what they're committing to, and also translating that research at the end in a way that the patients can understand and they can help use that research to make decisions with their physicians. Next slide.
Now, the other side of that coin is why patients should become partners in research. And as rewarding as it is to be a patient partner, and it is very rewarding, I often say no one really wants to be a patient partner. In fact, the eligibility criteria for being a patient partner mean that as a patient, you've had something go wrong with your health. It could also mean as a caregiver, someone close to you has had something go wrong with their health. The CanVector Patient Partner Council includes people with different lived experience who have different reasons for wanting to become a patient partner in research. We're a diverse group in some ways. Our group includes parents with young children as well as grandparents, and there's a variety of experience with VTE as both patients and caregivers. But we're pretty homogenous from a gender and socioeconomic perspective. So we continue to do our own work in the Patient Partner Council on diversity. Nevertheless, everyone in the Patient Partner Council has agreed to make time in their busy lives to become partners in research. Now, the need for knowledge is a big part of this. Blood clots are mysterious. Diagnosis and therapy may be uncertainty. It may generate many questions, and it may generate fear. Quality of life going forward after a diagnosis of VTE may be unknown. So we want to learn things as patients, but we also want to share things. We want to share our experiences, good and bad, that may impact research questions and design, and our belief that our contribution as a patient partner in research will help other patients, not only ourselves. So that last piece is at the heart of why people volunteer at all, to make a difference. And you'll see throughout this presentation that CanVector has in fact created conditions in which we can make a difference, working as patient partners in research. And we're very grateful as patients for every opportunity that comes our way. So thanks to CanVector for its initial vision and leadership and ongoing encouragement and support of its patient partners. Next slide.
So how did we begin? As many of you know, that CanVector grew from a previous research collaborative group that was predominantly focused on researchers. So one of the changes that CanVector introduced was bringing in many other research stakeholders to the table that included basic science researchers, trainees, research support staff, and coordinators, and patients were one of those. It's also noteworthy to know that patient partners were part of the design of the CanVector network right from the beginning, and they've always been part of the organizational structure of our network. Next slide, please. So this is a busy slide, but it shows the CanVector organizational structure. So we have the oversight of the network through the Scientific Steering Committee, and then of course the External Advisory Board, which also provides oversight. Next slide. Here, I just wanted to highlight and just illustrate the many parts of the network where patient partners contribute. So we are one of the six platforms of the network where the Patient Partner Council reviews the the group and how we function and operate. But we collaborate with other platforms, including the clinical trials platform and reviewing grants. We've had outreach with the basic science platform. On a leadership level, we have Carol as the co-lead, as well as Suzanne and Dennis Christopher, who are part of the leadership on the scientific steering committee. We'll go through some of the specific examples of ways in which patient partners work in different aspects. But again, contributions well throughout the network, which is something that I think is really strong for our group. Next slide.
I love that previous slide, but I love this one too, because it talks about the work that we've done in terms of creating structure and talking about governance of the Patient Partner Council. So we have about 8 to 10 current patient partners. And as I mentioned, we're intending to recruit several more. So once again, consider this as a recruitment call, and we can speak about this after the session. Our recruitment process involves an expression of interest written by the patient, as well as an interview, and information about the process is documented and available on the CanVector website. We have monthly meetings with flexibility as to when these occur. So we have a couple of our patient partners, our teachers. We schedule our meetings of the council at the end of their day to ensure that they can be part of our discussions. We have inclusive and shared decision-making. We're very conscious about that on issues such as compensation. And for the past several years, we've collaborated on sessions for the CanVector National Conference. So a lot of collaboration and communication between patient partners. We also recognize how important it is to provide support for all our patient partners, regardless of what stage they're at. And so at every stage of their engagement, we're looking for opportunities to provide guidance. We have written guidance. We provide sample letters of support, for example, for grant applications. And Lisa will talk about all of these things in a bit more detail later. We've endorsed the good practice of 2 patient partners working on projects together, sort of a buddy system of hands-on mentoring, which we think works well. We've also referred patient partners to outside training and resources, which can be very useful and which our patient partners have enjoyed. Next slide. So now back to a couple of thoughts on recruitment. Perhaps you've met patients and thought they would be good partners for CanVector. Well, here are some things that may help you reflect on this. It isn't only the lived experience with VTE that is important in the selection of patient partners for research. There's also several personal qualities that we look for and that are important. First of all, an interest in positive change, or put another way, optimism combined with realistic expectations. Our patient partners need to be able to give some time to this endeavor and their commitment. They need to have good listening skills. We all need to have respect for each other's views, even when they don't match our own beliefs. And we have the concept of listening and endeavoring to understand other points of view. The ability to give helpful feedback and the ability to work well with others. So those are some of the considerations in terms of our recruitment processes. Now, standardizing our processes by identifying good practices is another thing that we're very concerned about, and that's a priority for us as the council. So providing practical tools for patients and researchers. For example, guidelines for drafting lay summaries is something we're currently working on. And we're always interested in raising awareness of the council and its role within the CanVector network. Next slide, please.
So in today's seminar, we really wanted to give some concrete examples and illustrate the type of work that patient partners do, and hopefully be motivating towards other people considering inviting patient partners towards their team. So in this slide, I've listed close to a complete list of all the patient partner research teams that we've had to date. So we're close to 40 individual research projects. And it's possible we could have missed a couple of smaller ones on this list. And it's just an impressive list to show the scope and the amount of work that has already happened. And many of you may have already worked with our team. As Carol mentioned before, we do aim, at least in the last few years, at trying to pair 2 patient partners per each team. That allows this buddy system that the patient partners really value to sort of have a partner at those, what could be an intimidating larger meeting. They're also volunteers. And so if their commitment and their availability changes, having someone else to rely on and to work together has been something that's been a good feedback. In some of these projects, patient partners have been allowed or invited at the very early stages. And we really see a huge value in that. It allows the patient partners to really give opinions and contributions to the early design of the study. They can help with the granting applications. And if they're involved in that stage, they usually will offer to write a letter of support to support the grant. And it could be considered to be named as a collaborator or even a co-applicant on the grants. Next slide. So next, we've pulled across some examples of varying types of projects that patient partners have worked on and are continuing to work on beyond the individual trial. And we'd like to just highlight a few just to really get an understanding of the scope and importance of the work that they do. Next slide. So the first topic project we'll talk about is called Clot Top 10. So it's a collaboration with the James Lynn Alliance. So if you haven't heard of them, the James Lynn Alliance has an established methodology of a priority setting that focuses on bringing patients, caregivers, and clinicians together to identify and rank top priorities in a disease area. And so the aim is to make sure that health researchers are funding research in areas that matter to the people who are taking care of patients and patients themselves. So for this project, it really is co-led by a group of patient partners. Half of the steering committee is by design patient partners, and we have a structure that doesn't allow any major decisions to be made unless there's a quota number of patients and clinicians available on both sides for making those decisions. We've sent surveys and did an extensive analysis of those surveys to be able to narrow down categories of research priorities. And the patient partners have been integral in doing that analysis to come up with that list. Next slide. So from the very long list of research priority questions that came in, maybe 500-600 individual responses, the patient partners have grouped them and summarized them into lay questions that we are about to finalize this month. So this screenshot is just of the last survey, which will focus on honing in and finding a final list. And it shows you just, the scope and type of questions that come up in this important work. Next slide. The other thing that the patient partners have spent a lot of time on is just capacity building in our program. So when we started this program 7 years ago, we had lots of great ideas and ambitions for how patient partners to be involved, but we actually found little specific guidelines on exactly how to do that. And so in many ways, the first patient partners were pioneers, and they had to work through some of the practicalities and obstacles that sort of got in the way or carved the path that we are following now. So as an example, we were really excited when our patient partners had the first opportunity to be part of a grant and were offered acknowledgement for their contributions as a co-applicant, as all the other people influencing that were. But then we learned that that required them to get CIGR pins and going through the process of doing that. And even harder was they were required to complete the common CV biosketch, which is a format that's designed for researchers, not for patient partners. And so we had to kind of come up with a way around that. And that continues to be a struggle for some funding competitions. Patient partners offered and were asked to write letters of support, but without really understanding the grant review process or how those letters were actually going to be used, not having ever seen a letter of support written by a patient, that was an onerous task and very intimidating to figure out what is it they want me to write about there. And from that, the patient partners are really focused on coming up with guidance and practices and collecting examples that will help further patient partners when they do these tasks. So as I said, we have the patient partners have written a guide to writing letters of support as a patient partner, and they share examples amongst the council. They've combined a glossary of terms, which are frequent terms that if you just have it as a quick reference, it can help sometimes with a patient partner reading literature that may not be already converted to a lay language. We've revised, and we'll talk a bit later about a terms of reference document, but also a guide to how to complete that to make sure it's done in the way that the spirit is meant. The patient partners have developed a guide to how to review and rate grants as a patient partner, which again was a field that was new, and we had to kind of carve our way there. We have a patient partner compensation policy that was introduced and built and written with our patient partners. And we're working right now on a guide to writing life summaries. So a lot of work on capacity building, taking what we learned initially as pioneers, but kind of putting that down on paper, sharing it internally and sharing it externally as well. Next slide.
So this is one of our, just one moment. That was the sound of coffee being ground in the room next to me, and you know, I don't want to distract my attention by the idea of freshly ground coffee appearing before me. Lisa has just outlined those capacity building projects, and without her leadership and her encouragement, none of those things would have happened. But we are delighted that we found patient partners who would put up their hands and who would volunteer to do these things. And we do have some tangible tools, which is really important to what we do. One of the projects that is most exciting for us for a number of reasons, and for me personally, is the VTE cause project on core outcome sets. So this is about standardization of core outcomes measured in VTE research. And as I'm sure you know, a core outcome is an agreed standardized set of outcomes that should be measured and reported in clinical trials in specific areas of health or healthcare. So we're working with Invent, an international connection, and other international partners to establish core outcomes in VTE. The process for selecting this essential core outcome set heavily engages patients, clinicians, and other key stakeholders, just as Lisa mentioned, our work on the James Lind Alliance did. So 2 patient partners are on the leadership team for this project, and 1 patient partner, and that would be me, is named as a principal investigator for a grant to support the project. And this is a first for CanVector. It's very exciting to see this formal recognition of patient partnership. And honestly, every patient partner who learns about VTE cause or who is working on VTE cause is excited about it. It has an international scope. There's this power of the idea of harmonization and standardization of outcome sets across countries, not just within a country. And patients really, truly are at the heart of this study. And again, a very positive experience for patient partners. Practice will no doubt be improved as a result of this. And that improvement can be measured across not only the countries that participate in the study, but even beyond that. So again, a very exciting project for us. that has been impacted to a certain extent by COVID. And I have a comment about the impact of COVID on relationships and some of what we do as a council a bit later on. But again, one of our flagship projects with which the Patient Partner Council is directly and deeply involved. Next slide, please. So how can anyone refuse the opportunity to apply for something that has empower in the title? I don't know. So it was easy to convince people to step up with respect to the OSU Empower Awards. And we were successful with our application for a grant to empower patient ambassadors to champion research outcomes that are a priority for people who have lived experience with venous thromboembolism. So again, this is the grant supporting the project that was referred to in the previous slide. It's focused on patient partners as KT, or knowledge translation ambassadors. And again, it does have a patient partner as a co-lead for the project, which is a first for CanVector. And so the whole council is grateful that CanVector had the imagination, I think, to do that. Stay tuned for some exciting new developments with the Empower Awards. We're just getting started. And again, really excited about the opportunity to engage, to put some of the principles of KT into practice, and to do our very best to, again, champion the research outcomes from VTE cause. Next slide, please. So speaking of KT and knowledge translation, this is evidence summaries which are available on Clot Plus. And I would encourage people, if you haven't looked at them, to please do. This is really an important outcome of the work that patient partners can do and can contribute to. Knowledge translation is one of the things I like most about the job of being a patient partner, actually. So just look at some of these questions to a doctor from a patient, and they're deliberately phrased in that context. So KT provides the tool for a real conversation without jargon, without detailed scientific terminology, that can guide consideration of options between treatment options, clinical options, and ultimately can support decision-making about patient care. And that is really at the heart of what knowledge translation does and why the input of patient partners is key. It's a powerful and inclusive tool. And the CanVector team, I'll put a plug in for them, the CanVector team who does this work is fantastic. Everything from selecting the evidence summaries that are going to be used in again, these lay summaries for the use of not just patient partners, but also general practitioners in clinical care. So again, a particular job I like to do, and I know other patient partners do as well. Next slide, please. So just a quick word about some outreach beyond CanVector before I turn it back to Lisa. And again, when Lisa talked about us being pioneers and developing work and guidance and other kinds of things, we do think we have some things to offer. And our patient partners are very generous with their time in raising their hands to participate in certain things. So first of all, just a word about the Heart and Stroke Foundation. We had input to their mission critical analysis and work about the future. And part of that was about what happens with people with lived experience and how they're brought into discussions about patient care, and also the role of advisory councils, other sorts of things. And we were privileged to be in that room. We did a seminar presentation again with Invent, and Invent is again this international organization which promotes international collaboration. And we did it with colleagues from Ireland, and that it's posted on the CanVector website, and I encourage you to take a look at it. In fact, this presentation came from some of the work we did for InVent, but the Irish experience is quite different from ours in as how they presented it, and it was inspiring. So again, I encourage you to look at that. Mentoring to an SLE research group, and I'm really, I think we have some of the people involved with the SMLE Calculator project with us today, including Christine Sperling as their patient partner. We're very happy with the sort of outreach and collaboration with a sort of first-time patient partner, and we're very pleased to be able to support Christine and her orientation and contribution to the SLE research group. We also have become involved with an international CTPA standardization. I'm not sure whether this was a test for me from, Dr. Legal to see if I could remember what the CTPA stands for as a patient, but I did look it up, Grégoire, as you can imagine, computed tomography, pulmonary angiography, or imaging. So again, one of the challenges that patient partners always have is back to acronyms and glossaries. So, much of this outreach is about relationships, and I do want to talk about the impact of COVID. One of the impacts is that some of the work that we've been doing, outreach in terms of recruiting patients in the studies with which we're involved, has had to be put on hold because of COVID. Again, but we've still managed to make the outreach that we can do a priority, doing it virtually. We've still managed to keep in touch virtually with our monthly meetings, and again, hopefully can continue this outreach in a more personal and robust way, including probably a trip for Lisa and I to Ireland together with the InVent group. But again, we're very conscious of the responsibility, I think, to give back some of the experience and to share some of the tools that we have already developed. So next slide, please.
Yeah, so on that very note, we thought we'd end out today's seminar with just sharing some of the strategies that we thought were really instrumental in achieving successful partnerships with patients in our research endeavors. Next slide.
So this is a story I tell from time to time. I did the SPORE Masterclass when it was in person. That's how long ago it was. And someone made a real impression on me. And it was a young mother who had a special needs child. And she was very, very involved with that child's care and advocacy for her child and other things. But as a patient partner, she was often frustrated because she didn't exactly know what the patient partner role was and what the research team actually wanted her to do. So I always remember this, it's her contribution with the question, what do you want me to do? So building from a foundation of respect, there needs to be clarity on expectations of patient partners. Now that may depend on what stage a patient partner is engaged in research, but there does need to be clarity. And goodwill is important, but it's not enough to create conditions for success. So every effort has to be made to articulate and understand the specific contributions a patient partner can make and how they bring their knowledge and experience to research. So that question, what do you want me to do, is so important to manage expectations and to ensure results. So in general, patients, caregivers, and families want and need to be meaningfully engaged in all stages of research, and they can be extremely valuable contributors when given appropriate opportunities and appropriate support. So what does that support look like? And I know Lisa is going to give you some specific examples in just a moment. Is there mentoring, compensation, other health or social support to facilitate patient engagement? And once again, hats off to CanVector, because CanVector pays attention to all these things. We need to understand research goals, priorities. We need to understand timelines. We need to understand delays and why there may be delays. And the earlier we're involved in the research process, the better. We've said that in a couple of different ways in the last few minutes. What about a glossary to understand research terms? That was Gregoire trying to fool me with that acronym again. All the acronyms and even commonly used terms like major bleeding, long-term, like what do those things mean precisely? Patients don't know until we have a conversation about it. And again, I would salute CanVector because in terms of development of glossaries, excellent work has been done in this area. So we also need the space to contribute and to be heard as patient partners. And this can happen in a very unstructured way, but let me give you 2 specific examples. For one of the projects I'm involved with, every meeting has a standing agenda item for a patient partner input. Now, I see this not only as an inclusive invitation for me to contribute, but as a validation of the importance of the patient partner contribution. So even if I have nothing specifically to report, and I can continue to comment on other items on the agenda, there is a recognition of the patient partner as part of the research team, and it makes my day every time I see it. So thank you to Dr. Sudeep Shivakumar and his team. Another example is in the knowledge translation context, which I've already confessed I love, where I often feel like the amateur, and Dr. Lorianne Linkins reminds me how much she values my patient input. So keep communication lines open, tell us what you want us to do, give us feedback so that our contribution and your project is the best it can be. Next slide, please.
One of the things we did for that very specific feedback is we've developed the use of written terms of reference. So these are volunteers who are joining our team, but we found for the very reasons that Carol outlined, it was just very useful to just take that time to sit down and outline exactly what this partnership is going to look like. So how a patient partner fits into your project team might be very different project to project that the same patient partner is working on. For example, if the patient partner is joining a project that's just opening up and starting recruitment, there's not an opportunity to discuss the outcomes or the design of that trial. It's already done. And it's not to say that that was wrong to have included the patient partners so late. It is what it is, but be honest and open and outline in the terms of reference. Well, these are the type of things that we have an opportunity and would like your input on. And these are the ones that are set. And that's just helpful because the patient partners otherwise won't know where it is that they're meant to contribute. And when they choose to join a team, those are the type of things that they need to know beforehand. This practicality is about time commitments. How frequently would the meetings go on for? How long would the project might go on for? Is there a range where that could be extended by multiple years, depending on how long a specific research project could last? And just having those kind of ballpark estimates there. We talked a few times today about the use of compensation. So we do include a compensation model within the CanVector group, but then there's outlines of how much compensation has been budgeted for, how many hours are we talking about for the commitment, which is helpful for the patient partners when they're budgeting their own volunteer time and also deciding about when they're going to choose which projects. Communication is really, really important and in ways that you kind of forget sometimes. So it's good to outline as reminders a policy. So for example, once a month or once every 2 months, there should be a check-in. So even if there's not an update on the project, even if the project hasn't started because things are stuck in the contract negotiations, some people on the research team who've been through this before, they know that, it can take several months for this to happen, but a newer patient partner might be wondering, I guess they're just not needing my help anymore because no one has updated me or given me any information. So regular communications explaining that, if a grant is submitted for September 1st, when are you actually expecting the response time? When might the study start? Those type of regular communication updates, making sure that you tell the patient partners what the outcome of the grant was, even if it wasn't successful, is critical. And you know, this is their time and their volunteer work, so it's really important. So we like to just outline that in every new project that we start in a document that's not meant to be a formal contract, but just a way of making sure we're all on the same page when we start this project together. And the last thing we include is just a discussion of acknowledgements. How would a patient partner's work be acknowledged in publications or in other work? So it's just good conversations to have right at the start. Next slide. The last thing we wanted to highlight is just the importance of building strong relations. So, you know, that's, again, it's a bit of an obvious thing to say, but it really is important. Because remember, on the researcher side, you're often starting projects with people that you've known, you've met them before, you've heard about them. And some project teams can be quite large when you get to steering committees and whatnot. But the patient partner is new to that group, and they're trying to remember all the names and who's who and who does what from the beginning. And we've always done a lot of patient partner work virtually. And if anything, during the pandemic, things have improved because we've embraced using video technology versus the phone conference lines we did at the very beginning. But at the same time, it does prevent some of those personal connections. So I would really encourage trying to do that. If you're working with a patient partner that you don't have a strong relationship with already, before you have that meeting with 10 other people as a project team call, set up a one-to-one call and just review the project itself ahead of time. And take the time to introduce the other people on the call, maybe even building in 5 minutes at the beginning of the call to have that sort of social chit chatter that you normally would have at a regular meeting. Those are the things that kind of relate you as people to each other and will build on the working relationship. In-person meeting people is still important. And I was reminded of that quite recently when I had the opportunity to meet a patient partner that I've worked with for closely 2.5 years. And we'd never actually met in person, again, because of the pandemic and other barriers. But, you know, our patient partners really do report back the value of our in-person annual conference, for example. So examples of, you know, impromptu project team meetings over coffee, or even just the social chit chat of, you know, the dinner after the conference, where you actually get to kind of meet these people that you may have been working with and talking to and exchanging emails for a long time. And those are the things that really help the patient partners kind of feel comfortable in our group and then strengthen the sort of working relationship after the fact. Next slide, and over to Carol.
Thanks, Lisa. You know, I think that one of the best kept secrets among patient partners is that CanVector researchers are a lot of fun in those informal situations, and we've missed that over the last couple of years. It's just much more difficult to get that sense of who people are and the enjoyment of what people do and how they contribute, which is, again, we're going to have back, I'm hopeful, very soon. Now, it's hard to live up to Mother Teresa, as you know, you will well know, but this was a very clear statement that I found about why patient partnership works and why it's so important. You combine the value of lived experience with the clarity and precision of skilled research, and what you end up with, the outcome itself, strengthens and empowers the CanVector network. It strengthens the relationship between patient partners and researchers. It builds confidence, it builds transparency. And I think that this does sum it up, that patient partners can do things that researchers cannot, and researchers can do things patient partners cannot. But together we can and we do great things. I think we're ready for our question period. If people have any, I know that Lisa and I would be happy to respond. Thank you.
thank you very much for this excellent presentation. Always a pleasure to listen. So we have few questions coming. So I'm going to read them to you. First question from Susan Elliott. Will it be possible to obtain a copy of the terms of reference? I imagine it can be, it can be distributed through.
I think it may already be on the webpage, but I can direct you to it, but also by email. If you reach out to info@canvector.ca, we could forward it along for sure.
So I can see that Jessie is currently typing an answer, so you will probably have the information. Second question from Elena Shulikovsky. Kindly consider an unavoidable research coordinators as a really rich source for recruitment process. We all do have vast experience throughout the years, in your valuable project of development of practical tool that we all learn from our patients pool, as we as in lay summary writing, right? So another comment: on a daily basis, we do the knowledge translation that ending enrolling patient. And finally, we all acquired a significant experience over the COVID dictated remote patient access. Yeah, so a good point to include research coordinators.
If I can just make a personal comment to Elena, we connected in a phone call after we had met in person, a long phone call, and committed to that stronger relationship between the Patient Partner Council and Research Coordinator Group. And Elena, I haven't forgotten you. COVID has intervened in a way. I know you had a meeting just last week with a couple of our patient partners, and we're very much looking forward to not only me connecting with you personally, since we had such an excellent rapport initially, but also to support greater collaboration, definitely. So thank you very much for raising that.
Just to add in there, to follow up on one of our hidden agendas, as Carol referred to it today, is just encouraging thinking of recruitment. Research coordinators are and have recruited patient partners really well, and actually really well situated, because you spend a lot of time with patients as they, especially patients who are considering to participate in research. Maybe they choose it or not, but that process, and then the follow-up of patients. And it's been research coordinators that have really been able to identify that patient who really has that interest in not just themselves, but the research process, why you're doing it in a certain way, and the outcomes and the greater picture of the disease. And so I think a perfect position to sort of reflect on the people that you meet. Is there someone that you think that maybe would be someone who we may want to join our group? And so feel free to just reach out to us directly if you have any such people now or in the future. And we'd love to work with you on that front too.
And so I had this thought when I was listening. So how can we identify research patient partners? Who is the best person to identify these people? Is that the investigators? Is that the coordinators? So how? Because many of our patients, even if they participate in research, they don't know that patients can be involved in research.
Well, maybe I can just comment a bit from my own personal experience. I was recruited by a research coordinator, as far as I know. Throughout my treatment, I volunteered to be part of a clinical trial. And next thing I knew, and it was, again, quite a bit of time after that, I received communication directly from Lisa about any potential interest in being a part of the patient partner structure within CanVector. And I hadn't necessarily heard of CanVector at the time. I mean, I have to go back, several years, but it was, I think, the connection between my willingness maybe to raise my hand to be part of a clinical trial, my my curiosity, maybe asking questions about, what does double blind mean? And again, the follow-up with from Lisa directly in terms of, again, that questionnaire and interview process in terms of whether I might be a fit for the patient partner council. And again, so I don't know whether it's intuitive or whether it's just a result of research coordinator and physician experience. I don't know. But that was certainly my experience in terms of how I came to the CanVector patient partner platform.
I think that just to add to that, that the type of patient you're looking for is that one that really develops that interest in just a little bit more information. And in particular, so you want someone who has lived experience, but also who has come out the other side of maybe the acute crisis period of their own health, right? Because you have to kind of have your own experience and you go through your diagnosis, your impact, and then you have to be able to take a step back and then look at the bigger picture, because you may actually be thinking about things from a perspective that's not fully like your own experience as a patient, right? So the sort of lived experience and having, the second day after you had your DVT diagnosis, probably not the time to be generous and start helping everyone with DVTs. We try to avoid one agenda. So one bad outcome happened to our patient, and bad outcomes can be great motivations for patients to come forward and be involved in the process and go forward with change. There's nothing wrong with there. But if you're coming into it with just one thing, I want to fix this one small area and not interested in anything else, and that doesn't really work with a big group, right? So someone who kind of is willing to look at the big picture, to actually listen and understand that you give an opinion, then you have a discussion, and then it may not be, there's a discussion and not just like my way is the only way type of way. So, that kind of common sense things, but that's not really that different than how you pick anyone else you work with, right? It's just identifying those people. And, the way you would pitch it to our patient partner is sort of, are you interested in the other side, how we design research and the processes. And then Carol and I follow up with just a short introduction call to describe the program a little better. And we do a little bit of a semi-formal recruitment process just to make sure it's transparent in terms of how we're recruiting and making sure we have, geographic and diversity when possible. Yeah.
And the idea of patient partnership is daunting for a new patient, but for someone who comes into this, and I didn't speak enough perhaps when I spoke about our existing patient partners. I don't think I was explicit enough about what a terrific group of people they are, and how they do see the general good, and they do have that collective commitment in terms of improvements in medical health and in healthcare. Broad, as I mentioned, broad base of experience, but also just a terrific group of people in terms of collaboration and in terms of willingness to share. Lisa, we've been talking about some storytelling work that we're thinking of doing and engaging in. And this is to maybe support our patient partners in telling their stories if they wish to, and the power that they have. So again, altogether, just a terrific group of people for whom we're grateful for their support, for their commitment to CanVector, for the time they spend, and for always their willingness to put up their hands for a new trial or for, again, other ways in which they can assist CanVector. So thank you to all our patient partners.
Absolutely. We have another question from Nicola Potere. Thanks for the wonderful presentation. Are there data showing that when patients are directly and actively involved in all phases of a clinical trial, patient compliance and satisfaction are increased, less dropouts, etc.?
So I'm going to answer that with like a yes and no. There are a few people who tried to make that type of conclusion, right? You had a group like us who did some trials, were there any difference? But the problem is it's really hard to really tease out co-interventions. And so, studies are different. Recruitment is very variable. A study that you think is going to recruit really well doesn't, and does well at one side and not the other. So there's so many things that are going to contribute there that it's kind of hard to really come up with those kind of nitpicky specific outcomes. And so, and when I started this, I thought, well, that's what we have to do. We have to prove it, right? That you have to prove that the impact of including patient partners has an effect. But if you stop and think about it, have you ever proven that the impact of a methodologist is fixing it? Have you ever proven that any of the other people that work on the team? The whole idea is it's a team approach. And so it's not just one person and then something changes. It's the conversations that happen. And was it really the idea of the patient partner, or was it the idea of this person, or does it not matter because it was suggestions and collaborations that all contributed to it? So I actually prefer not to focus on proving the worth of one person of the team as much as the collective outcome. I mean, I do think we have a positive impact on research. I think anecdotally, our researchers tell us that they get feedback from their grant reviews saying that it strengthens the validity of how quality the disease question is and how it's supported. I think it gives transparency to the patients who are going to participate in research, knowing that patients have been part of the design and that process. And so, if you search enough, like I said, you will find a few papers that will kind of quasi make those kind of claims and make sense. But we kind of focus on over the big picture of the impacts.
Thank you. I don't see any other questions. Maybe we can leave a few seconds if there's anyone in the attendance who wants to ask their last minute question. So if not, oh yes, there's one. Sorry. There was one last question. I don't know if I'm allowed to ask it. Again, from Elena Shulikovsky, it's more a comment rather than a question. So the patient partner existence helps to build the trust in ongoing research. True. Also, if I can comment. The fact that patient partners are involved from the beginning of a study, they may also bring some important questions, research questions, as you mentioned, and because they feel that this question is important for them. Maybe this is something that investigators may not have reached before or identified before, and it may help adherence to a trial, for example, because patients may feel more involved in this. This is really their. It matters to them. It's not only I'm helping people to do research. I am involved in that because I feel that the question is really important to me. And my example is that before the DOACs era, there was. So there was no issues with menstrual bleeding. Nobody was talking about that. And then because more bleeding occurred on DOACs, then patients started to ask questions, why? And then researchers started focusing on this question, why are there so many more menstrual bleeding in young women who have started anticoagulants? So it's just to highlight this extreme need of patients' partner and the need to listen to our patients when there's a new issue arising. So thank you again, everyone. So there's this last slide. So to remember you that the recordings will be available online, and we will shortly announce our next seminar in May. Thank you very much. Have a good afternoon, everyone. Bye.